little video just to get us in the right frame of mind. So Nathan, over to you.
All good.
These guys are good. Let's get to work. A hot little startup with a great idea. Their target, a ProPass. Offices in 12 countries, 5,000 staff. You'd think they'd be secure, wouldn't you? Make some noise. Pause. A smokescreen. A decoy breach to hide what they're really after. Confidential information hidden in the depths of the system. Come on.
Still here?
The computer's crashed.
Join the club. See you Monday.
It's okay for some.
Right now, the chances are someone, somewhere, is attacking you. And you don't even know it.
Okay, chaps. We're in.
I bet you're wondering how they got this far.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks very much,
That's
Nathan.
the video.
Cool. I think it's actually quite an interesting video. I think it was a video made by Deloitte and Semantic, I think. So we just borrowed a little piece of it just to set the flavor of today's talk. However, I'm not too sure when that video was made, but you just have to look at recent press releases and probably some of you personal experience to know that what they were talking about is currently going on now. So when he said that, you know, probably somewhere somebody is actually attacking you, they're not wrong. It's really relevant in today's society, and we thought it was a good idea to actually talk about cybersecurity and what it means to organizations in today's tech talk. The recent events, even in South Africa, would be the National Space Agency. Even though we don't have rockets, we still are member of the space race, and we provide a lot of research and development in South Africa. The Department of Justice were hacked. I'm not too sure if that was somebody trying to hide his fine, but you know, obviously it's an important part of our country. And I think recently Transnet, the Ports Authority, were attacked. And speaking to a friend of mine on the weekend, he was telling me that they're still recovering from that. So if anybody thinks that it's just a movie and that it's not relevant and that it doesn't happen now, is sadly mistaken. It is a serious part of our daily life, particularly in IT. And honestly, you can take some of the things we're going to discuss, you can take into your personal life as well, from the way that you consume IT at home. So today's talk really is based around zero trust. Zero trust seems to be a phrase that you often hear now within our own IT community. And up until a little while ago, I was not really aware of what it was. So I think it's important that we start off by setting the scene and talking about zero trust. But before that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce the other members of the panel. Nathan Kane, Bertie Neethling, both from our security side of the business. Sorry, I'm just Kia Mkonto, who is pre-sales in our cloud side, and myself, I'm a solutions architect, mainly in the data center side of the business. So the two brains on the talk today would be Nathan and Bertie. Kia and myself are onlookers to a large degree. However, the subject does reflect and does move into our areas of expertise as well. So to start off with, I think I'm going to ask Kia if you can just explain to everybody who's on the call what zero trust is. I thought it was a product, but it clearly isn't.
Thank you, Paddy. Hi, everyone.
Zero Trust is not a product, but is a security strategy, a security model, which is, one would say, is a set of principle, policies, framework that is based on an acknowledgement that threats exist both inside and outside the network boundaries. It's more of a security concept that you shouldn't trust anyone, but you should always verify. And
Was
also,
on that webinar.
and
Yeah.
also, as I've said, that zero trust is not a product, it's a security strategy, which means that with zero trust, when you try it out, you have to know that it's a journey. It's not something that you just plug it today and it works. It's not a simple replacement of systems or technologies that we are currently using. And as an organization, once you go and use the zero trust, you should be prepared to continue to operate and support existing entities based on the security while investing in zero trust initiative. And one would say, why am I saying that zero trust is a journey? It's because that with zero trust, you need to make sure that you have a plan, sort of a roadmap that shows your IT modernization requirement as you move from your current system to zero trust architecture. You have to understand the users that you have, the assets and the processes. Because with zero trust, you can't protect something that you don't know. That's why it says that you should verify always and never trust anyone. It's more, it uses the you are guilty until proven innocent approach. Thank you, Ben.
Great. Thanks, Kia. Yeah, it's a good thing that you pointed out that it is a journey. Businesses may be at different levels of maturity within their security posture, but potentially have left areas open. Excuse me. I think what the zero trust model, and in fact, I did a little bit of research on the zero trust model, and I found out that it was developed by a guy, an analyst for Forrester. I'm reading his name just in case I don't get it right. It's John Kinderbach, and it was actually developed in 2010. So it's not something that's new. I'm surprised that we still are being affected by malicious actors and by ransomware and things like that today, when this actually was the concept and the actual model was developed in 2010. I think in the model, it's quite clear that it is a journey, but the one thing that is important to recognize is there is no end point. As you go down, as you progress along a timeline with cybersecurity, you obviously have to modify and learn as you go along. I mean, if you think about it, the WannaCry attack was in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And today we're still having ransomware attacks now. I mean, I know of some recent. Correct, eh? Nathan?
Yes, 100% correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is... Okay, carry on, Paddy.
No.
Yeah, like I said, the ransomware that you get these days are actually spawned off the old ransomware. It's not really, we haven't gone past that stage. So you still need to have visibility to see exactly what is happening on the said machine, and you should be able to react immediately or instantly when something gets flagged. So those things can happen really quickly. It can take about, let's say, 16 seconds to encrypt about 10,000 devices, because they feed off speed, and it needs to happen very quickly in order for them to actually have an effect on a company or organization. So visibility is key in that aspect.
Okay, so I think in the framework of zero trust, in the Forrester framework, and it looks like everybody else is following along in the Forrester mold, there are 5 pillars, if I'm not mistaken, And each one of them has a zero trust methodology or strategy for each of the pillar. In the pillars, data is obviously the pivotal pillar, because that happens to be what everybody's after, whether it's malicious or whether it's for gain, for monetary gain. Data is the new oil, according, in the IT world, in our world. From there, we look, the next pillar would be people, then devices, then workload, and then infrastructure. So those are the 5 pillars. So the 5 pillars are data, people, devices, networks, and I think workloads, I think it was, if I've got them right. Yeah, I think it is networks and workloads. Yeah, that's correct. So I think what we would like to do now is just talk about the various pillars and what can be done and why we would do it. But before we start that, what I would like to say is Forrester does point out in their documentation that the very first stage of your journey is to ensure that you have executive buy-in, because it's really the executives that stand to lose potentially from a monetary point of view, and obviously the loss of the company. So they are held accountable for losses in this area. So you need executive buy-in. The second reason that you need executive buy-in is some of the things that you need to adopt, some of the principles and practices you need to implement are not necessarily enjoyed by everybody in the organization. Sometimes people do feel that they are being over monitored and over controlled. So some of the decisions that you need to take need to come from the executive level, and they're not done by a security officer or somebody along that line. The other thing that they do point out, to start off with, you need to identify your posture. You need to identify where you are in a maturity level for the various pillars. So you need to actually analyze those various pillars, and we'll go through that when we go through the actual pillar itself. But the other side of it is that I think here also referred to it, is you need to understand what you're protecting. You need to understand where it is, and you need to understand how am I going to protect it? Because if you don't understand what it is, it doesn't matter what rule or policies you put in, they're probably not facing the right direction. You're not protecting what you should be protecting. So,
all right, people.
Sorry, not sure what that was. So I think that's the starting point. So data being the crux of the attack. Let's talk about that, Bertie. Let's talk about data. What can we do with data? How do we identify it first, and then what can we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about data, first of all, you need to know where your data resides, not only from a zero trust model or to try and protect your data, also from a legislative model in recent times. If you think back here in South Africa, we had the POPI Act that was passed about a year or so ago. So you need to, first of all, know where your data reside. Luckily, there is a lot of tools out there that you would be able to use to get this all done and sorted. Once you know where your data is, you need to know who is accessing your data, how are they accessing it. Having a well-maintained Active Directory does go a long way in knowing who has access to that. Once you have all that under control, then you will need to start manage how your users access those data or that data. You need to put in controls to manage the access, identity access management or a privileged access management. There's quite a few tools that you can use, and then once you've implemented these tools, the magic comes in when you strike a balance in terms of the rules that you set or the policies that you implement. The policy shouldn't be too lenient to have anyone access data, especially when it comes to your personal information or financial data. And then the other side is you can't be too restrictive, because then you keeping people from doing their jobs properly, or you'll have some delays in terms of processing orders or anything like that. So once you have all these tools in place to protect your data, the biggest thing there is to strike the balance between being too lenient and too restrictive.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think you mentioned an important point there, and I think that's where sometimes companies and organizations get it wrong. You do start off with a zero access or at least privileged access and go from there. But the principle is that whoever is in your organization should be able to access whatever they require without impediment. In other words, they should be able to do their job, but not necessarily do somebody else's, and to see data that they're not supposed to see. And I think you mentioned another very good point is, while we're talking about the analysis of your data and the risk and things like that, with Poppy is another important part of the equation, and it's quite recent. But however, obviously keeping the business running. I mean, if you're a bank and somebody like that, and you lose a significant amount of credit card details and things like that, the impact to you financially from a fine point of view is significant. If you lose data to the degree that you can no longer transact business, in other words, it's part of your business accounting system or something along that line, I mean, that could bring a business to its knees. So, data is actually the center of everything. It is really what we are trying to protect in this situation.
Sorry, Brady, if I could just jump in there as well, something that I also wanted to mention maybe is, apart from losing money and all of these types of things, the reputational damage is also quite big. Yes. I mean, if a bank or a financial institution would was breached and a lot of the information and data was leaked, you'll definitely have some reputational damages, then, which in turn will also be something that you would lose money on, because I mean, people will move to another bank if it was a bank that had this type of breaches or leaks.
Yeah, that immediately breaks the trust. So you will definitely start losing customers, and people won't want to deal with you. That will be from a customer perspective, as well as for business, for the bank themselves, partners, people that they sponsor and stuff like that, because their data is also at risk. It's not just making money, it's who you deal with. So there should be some form of level of trust when you handle sensitive information.
Okay, so we've established the data. The data is the center of the pillar. But as per everything else, we've got humans that are part of the equation, and they potentially are, if you read, the weakest link in the whole scenario. So if we're protecting our data, we've established who can do what with the data, and we've got rules and policies around it. Now we need to actually enforce that with the people. And so how do we go about zero trust from a people point of view then, Nathan?
Yeah, look, people or humans will always be the weakest link. Not everybody is technically inclined, and they might not notice things that the normal person or the more cyber savvy person would actually pick up. So that is why you would need to have secondary tools in place to help you as the IT admin or the owner of the data identify whether the user is actually who they say they are. Are they connecting from a known location? Because it will be very, very strange if I had to connect to one of our resources somewhere in Canada and I was in the office just an hour ago. So all of those things you need to be able to pick up on quickly. The devices that the user uses, is it a known device? Even if it's a BYOD, you need to declare those devices with IT, because they need to know what device it is that you brought onto their network. So when it comes to the user, there's so many things you need to take into consideration. First of all, like Zero Trust works, you need to trust nothing and no one. So treat everybody as they are a criminal. Let's say the user that's trying to connect, make sure that you have a proper identity for the user. Make sure there's multiple ways that the user can actually authenticate. And if they do, there will be checks to check what they are authorized to access. So it's not just about saying who you are and where you are coming from. You should also check what they can do. And when they are authenticated and authorized, what are they able to use and access, and does it interact with any of your other applications? So they will always need to be verified. And once a user is in or connected to a resource or your network, you would then constantly have to monitor and verify whether the device is still the same, whether the user is still clean, and things like that, because we don't want to have anything bad happen while that data is being accessed, because the whole objective behind Zero Trust is to keep your data secure and not really the user or the person, because that is, like Paddy said, that is our new oil or our new commodity, and the whole thing basically revolves around your data. Right. I hope that explains or gives you an idea of what to look at when you think about the user.
Yeah, no, that's great. So we've established a couple of things with people. Authenticate, so multi-factor authentication comes to mind. And it's not so strange, because if you do banking on your phone and things like that, you will be sent a one-time password or one-time PIN that you are required to enter. So there are various methods that we can use to establish that this person is who they are. The other thing to keep in mind is, I don't know how many organizations have people that have left the organization still have access, passwords, and the ability to access the organization, and they have not been deleted from maybe Active Directory or something along that line. So there's another side of it that we need to make sure is clean.
So that speaks directly to the redundant access permissions. So before you, like I said, visibility is very important. So you need to know, like Bertie said, where your data resides, and then you also need to know who has access to what. So if John left the company and his user is still active, he still has access to some resources, that should be dealt with immediately, because that can be seen as a potential risk. If somebody knows that John left and the account is still active, let's say it's a malicious insider, they can get somebody to use that credentials and do something malicious to your organization. They can't pin it back to John. John is gone. It will then fall on the IT admin or the security ops as to why that account is still active. So it's very important to revoke access, disable or remove an account.
Okay, so we've established a zero trust model for people. I see we have quite a delay. We've established a zero trust for people. We've established the fact that data is the key to the whole exercise, and we've put in policies that allow the correct people to see the data that's relevant to their business. And I think one of the things that you also mentioned there is you need to continue to do that. It's not a case of just setting it up and saying this data is XYZ and I'm going to protect it, because data grows all the time. So you need to continually analyze that data and establish a policy based on that data. So, again, we go back to the fact that this is a marathon. It's not a point in time. You're not going to arrive at a point in time and say, I'm secure, because the people have got multi-factor authentication or something. Quite rightly, if they've left, we've got holes, they've got redundant access, they move jobs, so the policy needs to move with them. So we've established that there's zero trust for data, zero trust for people. You did allude to the zero trust for devices, and I think that's quite important, particularly the bring your own device, and now people using Android phones and iOS phones on the network. There's a lot of resistance from the person when your security division requests that they add antivirus or some security locks onto the device. How do we handle that? I mean, really?
Yeah, look, BYOD is a very, very hot topic. You can say it's your device, you own it, but if you're going to use that on my network to access my resources, then there will be rules. You can't just bring a device and try to do your work. Rule number one would be we need to secure that device first of all. If that device gets used at home because it's still yours, we need to have some peace of mind that there is active security. And the location, the way you use your devices, they can make use of containers. So you can containerize that device as well, like have a safe, secure location on the actual hard drive where only company data is stored. So there's many ways to get past that. And then obviously, when you do make use of a BYOD device, multi-factor authentication is also very important because we need to know that you are who you say you are. And it's not just BYOD. There's lots of other things if you look at inside of your organization as well. Things that can't authenticate. What do you do with those? There are things like IoT devices, like you mentioned, there's smartphones. What about the smart TV? That can't load an agent. What about a smart coffee maker or a smart fridge? Those are always also devices that have network access. They have IPs, but they can't authenticate. So in cases like that, it would be very beneficial to the company or to IT to actually put that on their own separate segment that has access to nothing else because they have network access and they can be exploited. So those would need to have regular firmware updates to stay compliant, regular updates, and without having a Z10A or Zero Trust agent on it, it can make things a bit difficult. To secure devices within your own network can be easy because you have different tools that you can make use of. Security, antivirus, endpoint security is one of them. You have multi-factor authentication, you have Active Directory, you have Azure AD, IAM roles, so you can control what they can see and what they can access. So there's many ways. If you look at the tools with an FD, we've got Fortinet, we've got RSA, we've got Trend Micro. That can give you visibility, but for some devices, it might be a bit of a challenge, and that is where network segmentation will come in very, very handy.
Okay, thanks. You mentioned the next pillar within the 5 pillars, and that's the network. So really, Bertie, from a networking point of view, from the zero trusted networking, how do we handle that?
Yeah, so probably the oldest and still relevant way of applying zero trust to a network would be a firewall. I mean, if you go to any firewall engineer or expert or even a network expert, your first rule and the rule of the highest priority always on the firewall is block all. From there, you can then start giving access to whatever needs access into your network or out of your network. I mean, even though there's a lot of people and companies that feel that a firewall has become redundant, well, with the pandemic and all of these things, I mean, last year, 99% of the companies out there, the bulk of their workforce working from home. From there, they needed to connect either to your on-prem or private cloud infrastructure. That was mainly done by VPN. A lot of the times, I'm not saying all of the times, but a lot of the times that connection is being handled by a firewall somewhere. Looking at zero trust, it's also important to keep a close eye on which users still have access to that VPN. The reason for this is, I mean, as the restrictions and lockdowns and all of these types of things gets relaxed, more and more companies are adopting a hybrid working model. So then you need to decide, okay, who needs access, who doesn't need access. So those types of things still needs to be monitored. and kept up to date on a regular basis, not well, maybe on a daily basis. Need to give them access at certain times. Maybe they can only access the network between 9 and 5 or 8 and 5, depending on their working hours. That's a lot of controls that you need to be applying. And then the other thing is, even though the perimeter has moved to the end user in a BOID world, there's still some network security that is important. I mean, Nathan alluded to it earlier. The IoT devices, more and more people are being, well, more and more companies are bringing in IoT devices. I mean, I don't know if you've read the article, but there was a instance somewhere in Europe where a hacker was able to gain access to someone's network through their coffee machine. So your IoT devices is also being, if not protected properly, can also be something that can give access to a threat actor. And now a lot of people think, okay, but why do I need a coffee machine that has internet access? Well, if you want to streamline your processes at work, having a coffee machine that has internet access, you don't need to have someone check your coffee machine every day. So that all of these things are put in place to streamline work. So you don't have someone doing something that can be done by a machine. I mean, that's why we have artificial intelligence these days and machine learning and all these types of things. I mean, any technology company that wants to go forward needs to have some sort of a machine learning or AI somewhere running in the background. That's just the way it works. So that machine learning, if there's no security aspect to it, that can sometimes be detrimental to a company's security, and the difference between being breached and becoming a statistic or being a company that has I don't want to say flawless security record, but a very well or very good security record.
Yeah, no, that's great. Actually, you mentioned a couple of things there which are quite relevant now in today's world, specifically the IoT devices. Because if you think about it, a lot of the cameras and things that are around the buildings are all connected via either wireless or they're connected via a physical cable. So it's not inconceivable that an actor would be able to gain access through that route. So yeah, that's very true. I think one of the things that you also mentioned was that it must be an ongoing process, and there should be something that within your organization that can react quickly. So there needs to be machine learning, there needs to be AI, there needs to be analysis needs to take place, and that analysis has to be quick. I mean, it's pointless being told through a log that you scan the next day that you lost data, because I mean, the fact is it's gone. There's not much you can do about it. But it's far better for defense at depth, for an appliance to see something happening that's an anomaly, which is outside the normal trend, and shut it down and alert somebody to say, this has happened. It might be valid. So at least it goes to maybe the security officer and says, look, this person tried to do this, or this monitor or this camera is behaving unusually. It's not feeding film. It's feeding specific data. So that needs to continue, and I think that's something that's brought out in the zero trust methodology and strategy, is that while we can do all of these things, there still needs to be a continuous learning cycle within the organization. And obviously, if that learning cycle is too slow, we've shut the door while everything's gone out the back door. So it needs to be fast, and I think that's one of the things that they do mention, is they rely heavily on analytics and understanding what is happening within your organization. I think the other thing that you mentioned there was the firewall being on the perimeter. Now, that really talks to workloads. And in workloads, Forrester puts infrastructure heavily into that pillar. And that's really my my area of expertise. And I must admit, I think if I recall, most organizations, if I'm through the door into the data center, I potentially have access to everything. Now that for me would be, if you consider it against the zero trust, is problematic, because I'm no longer coming via a firewall access, which is in the LAN, the general public. I'm sitting in a protected, hopefully, because it's in a small loop, a protected network, but I'm sitting actually on the hardware. And recently, we've seen attacks take place via the hardware. We had one attack take place that actually issued a destroy file system command to a backup device. Now remember that people that are attacking you do recognize the fact that you have a data management and a resiliency posture. So the very first place they go to is to attack the physical device, the part of the infrastructure that is going to allow you to recover. So if I can destroy that, then you will have to pay me, or whatever the reason for the actor to be in your environment. You're at his beck and call, so to speak. So I think that's one of the areas that maybe potentially a lot of organizations don't take enough care about. They don't really look at how am I protecting the actual infrastructure layer and ensuring that the person that is actually on the network, working on the network, should be, when I say network, it's the infrastructure layer network, is allowed to be there and is doing what he is meant to be doing. I do a lot of work in data centers, and in quite a few data centers, I'm never allowed to be on my own. And some of them, I'm never allowed to use my own device. Okay, I'm given a device. It's not and it's monitored. That device is only able to do a certain task. I'm not attached to anything else. So in some situations, I think the posture from a workloads point of view is quite good. But I'm sure there are many organizations, and I've been in them, where the posture from a workload infrastructure side is quite weak. So I think I see we are galloping on in time. So I think we've gone through the 5 pillars. We've established data being the crucial part of the element of the equation. People being the riskiest, and it's not because we just don't believe people. I mean, people do stupid things. They write their password and stick it on the laptop. I mean, that's sort of pointless, really. And then, you need multi-factor authentication. So anybody who claims we shouldn't have multi-factor authentication has never really been in IT for long, because I've seen it many times. I walk up to a device in the data center, and I can see the username and password is stuck on a piece of paper on the actual front of the panel. That doesn't help. Devices clearly in today's world, and we all alluded to it. Working from home presents a serious challenge to IT, because somebody who actually works in Cape Town is now entering the network from say, let's say Knysna, because he is now remote worker and he is able to work from Knysna. I've got a situation, a guy who actually works in Cape Town is working from London because he got stuck in London. So, it presents an interesting challenge, and I think we need to be careful about that, and organizations obviously take cognizance of that and they work around it. From a networking point of view, networks are becoming more intelligent. So a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about is built into into the switching, into the firewalls that does do the analytics, and then the workloads. And I think I just want to end with the one thing. I'm going to read it here. In the model, there are zero trust principles, and I think it's quite pertinent that we remember it because it talks to all the subjects. And the first principle is people should require secure, authenticated access to all resources that they need. So that's an important aspect of it. And that talks to the fact that this is not a one-time end point, because as people progress within the organization or change jobs, that needs to move with him. So it's a continuous journey. It's not, there's never going to be an end point where you say, okay, I've done it. Adopt a least privilege model and enforce access control. That is included into the access to the infrastructure, to the data center layer, to the physical hardware layer. You know, make sure that you have got controls there, that you do sign in, that you do, you know, the person is accompanied by somebody. I'm just giving you examples from real life. And I think the most important one, and probably the one that we do the least, and that's inspect and log all activities using data security analytics. It's probably the most expensive part of it, because you need sophisticated hardware and software to do that. But it probably is the one that's going to save you the most. It's going to be the aspect that reacts the quickest and is able to give you insider knowledge of what is happening in your environment. So I just want to mention that on Netflix there's a series. It's called Mr. Robot. And I think everything that we've spoken about today, you just need to watch a couple of episodes of Mr. Robot, and it's all validated by that specific series. It's a hacking series, and it talks to networks, it talks to people, vulnerabilities, talks to infrastructure, it even talks to, you know, tape drives and things like that. So it really it shows that this is a whole view that you must have, a holistic view that you must have of your security posture, and that everybody needs to buy into this, because if we are breached, or if an organization is breached, potentially they could go out of business. And even if it's a small organization, that might be 50 people. Those are 50 people without jobs. So we might say, oh, look, I'm tired of having the security on my laptop. It's a pain whenever I want to watch videos or something along that line. It stops me going to tobacco and alcohol, whatever it happens to be. Just bear in mind that it's also protecting you. It's protecting your job. So I think any last comments for you guys? I'll just check to see if there's been any questions.
Yeah, Paddy, what you mentioned is very, very true. So it's not just about those 50 people that's going to lose their jobs. What about the hundreds of thousands of people's that's personal information that might have been leaked? So it can be credit card information, it can be hospital information, it can be any personal identifiable information. So that is also something you need to take into consideration, because that is also a big loss for the company and for the person that was affected by it. So there's a huge ripple effect when data has been stolen, or it gets lost, or something bad happens to it, because it's normally not just the company that is going to suffer, but there are other individuals that is also going to fall in line after that. And to keep those things working continuously, you need to have visibility. If we have to reference back to the video we played at the beginning, they actually catch out the people, the attack gets stopped, and how they do it basically is they have visibility over the whole environment. They have analytics, and that gives them the ability to act immediately or act quickly when there is an anomaly that has been detected. So zero trust can be implemented, but to keep it to keep it going, you need to see and have visibility over what is happening, and then also the ability to act quickly when something bad has been detected. Thanks, Paddy.
Bertie?
Yes, yeah, from my side, I just want to touch a bit on the devices side. You know, I mean, a lot of people say, I'm not going to let them load all kinds of stuff on my machine because they want to monitor me. They want to see what I do after hours, those types of things. And I can truly say that's not the case. They just want to protect their own, the company wants to protect their own data. And the other thing is the user, if they bring their own device, what they need to realize is just remember you've got a enterprise level security product on your machine, something that you sometimes maybe be too expensive for you as a person to buy. So the company is just protecting their own data. It's not a case of trying to monitor you or see what you do after hours. It's not a company that want to sell your data. They just want to protect their own. So that's it.
Okay, before we go to Kia, I see there's a question. Vijay, you have a question? Would you like to?
Yes.
Yep.
I would like to ask you, like we have talked about zero client networking and those things. Like people are also moving to the cloud environment nowadays. So most of the applications are in cloud, and then some of the application in local, let's say hybrid environment. And in that situations, sometimes it's difficult to place the authentication server, whether we have to keep it in local or whether we keep a authentication server in cloud. Especially in our country, I'm from Botswana. We have a very challenging networks bandwidth availability over here. So what is the best recommendation? Like we can see the authorized and authentication servers, we should utilize the cloud based, like so many vendors are already offering, or we should create our own premises authentication servers, or how is your approach to on the cloud side for the zero client network architecture?
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, Vijay.
Hi.
For that, you have to implement some policies on that. As they've mentioned at first, that you have to put in policy that this user can access this user can access that. So those are the least privileged policies that you can also implement to help you. Or if you are in cloud and you feel like if you think that you can apply the multi-factor authentication, authentication.
Yeah, I think what Kia is trying to say is the cloud providers makes it so easy these days. You would have a on-prem AD server which you can use for authentication. The same goes for cloud. You have Azure AD and you have similar IAM roles within AWS. So multi-factor authentication plays in both of those spaces as well. So whatever you implement on-prem can be replicated in the cloud as well. And they will be able to talk to each other to have the same form of identities being picked up on both instances. So it's not really a challenge. And then also you need to think about what you are trying to protect in those different environments. So like I said, Azure has its own authentication as well as AWS and Google Cloud. So you aren't really prohibited from doing those type of things like you are doing with on-prem.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think Vijay, I do understand your situation, because I mean, as you alluded to, that potentially the network is not as reliable as it could be. I think in that scenario, you really, and I think Nathan spoke to it a little bit, is you need to identify what the risk factor is on both sides. You need to identify the risk factor on the cloud. In other words, have maybe a separate policy based on the cloud, and how you implement that will be based in the cloud. So obviously you can't rely on an on-prem type authority to authenticate to the cloud if you don't have that access. If that access doesn't exist, you're going to need to rely on a cloud access, and you haven't said which cloud you're talking to. So it could actually be, when we talk about clouds, it could actually be just a hosted private cloud hosted somewhere else, which does not have the elaborate IAM and things like that we would get from AWS and maybe Azure. So in that situation, you need to make sure that whatever you do is supported by that cloud. So if you require an authentication methodology in the cloud, you will have to put that in. If you are able to have it replicate or sync to a local authentication, then that's also good. But in your scenario, it's a little bit more difficult, in as much as I think in your situation, you're probably going to have two. You're going to have to authenticate against the cloud for the cloud portion of it, and authenticate against the local on-prem for the local side of it. Yeah.
We also have a scenarios like the cloud. There is no cloud, but some of the users, delegates are working from outside of Botswana in different countries, or maybe works from home, and they want to try to access the resources in the organizations. So through the firewall, and then in that scenario, we need to do zero trust network deployment, seamless access whether inside or whether outside, doesn't matter with users or location, but they should have seamless policies to access the resources from both sides, right? No cloud in this scenario. So in that scenario, also the difficulty is like we should keep the on-premise authentication or cloud authentication. That is also my queries.
I think that's a little bit too long for today's discussion. We're going to run out of time.
Yes.
I think we've got your details, and one of our security guys will get hold of you, and then we can have a separate discussion along that line. But yeah, it's a good point. You know,
if I could just throw in some 2 cents there. Vijay, a lot of times what happens is the company has their on-prem data. Now they want to move to the cloud and maybe adopt a hybrid type of situation. This quite speaks to the DLP journey, or data loss prevention. That's where you start off with a DLP solution that is purely on-prem. From there, you would then start moving to your cloud apps like a SharePoint, OneDrive, those types of things, or Office 365. Then you will include a add-on like a cloud apps that will start looking at that apps, give you visibility of data movement in there. But as soon as you want to start blocking and applying policies and all those types of things, then you would need to implement a cloud application security broker, but then we'll be able to block the exfiltration of data in there. But yeah, as Paddy said, that is a conversation for another day. But yeah, that's how you would initially try and start off with a on-prem DLP, and then move into your cloud apps, and then start implementing a cloud application security broker.
Good. Oh, cool. Nice.
I think we've got time for one more question. There's one more question.
I think there's one in the
questions.
chat.
Yes. From Nazir, is zero trust a regulatory compliance tick box strategy? No. I would say, and I'm not a security person, but my answer would be no.
Currently, no, there is no. It's not a compliance regulatory compliance strategy. I can say that, these types of things, as breaches happens on a daily or hourly basis, it will probably move towards something like that. If you look at your two-factor authentication, the first two-factor authentication was implemented in 1986. It's 30 years later, we're still using it. So it's definitely something that we can see moving towards. Regular legislation and stuff like that gets implemented, but needs to be updated regularly as the whole world evolve. If you look at COVID has evolved the world to a cloud strategy quite quicker than any director or any technical person would ever be able to. So it's definitely something that is worth looking at, that your zero trust would be becoming part of companies as well as European unions, all those types of legislative bodies, and it will definitely become part of the solution, yes.
Yeah, I think just to wrap up now, and to answer your question, Nazir, even in Forrester's report, which was 2010, or the strategy when it was developed in 2010, they looked at the reasoning for it was to protect data like data that's covered by POPI or GDPR or HIPAA and some of the other regulations that need to be enforced. And that was one of the reasons for adopting this type of model. So yes, as Bertie said, it might become a tick box, but I think it's going to become a necessity anyway. I don't think you're going to need to have a tick box, because if that stuff gets lost and gets published on in the World Wide Web, I think the company's in for a rather large surprise from a fine point of view. So but I think it does play into the whole story of zero trust and the zero trust methodology and the strategy, that it all blends together and one supports the other. It's not a single instance like, I've got a firewall, I'm happy, I'm out of here, I've got zero trust. That's not the answer. So I hope we've been able to just start a little bit of a conversation around what it is. I must admit, when I first started this, and I was asked to be part of the discussion, I really had an infrastructure view of it, and I like to do it, whatever I like to do. But however, having researched it and being involved in discussions based on security, I do realize that every one of us needs to take cognizance of it and to adhere to the rules and to recognize why they're there. They're for our benefit more than the company, because if there's no company, we don't have a source of income. So, it actually protects us. Inadvertently, it protects the company. So thanks, guys. Thanks very much for joining. I hope if there are any questions, guys, please, you can mail them to us. It's no problem.
Thank you.
Otherwise, hope to see you on the next one. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you all. Thank you for joining, and thanks for your
Thanks,
patience.
thanks. Thank you.
Thanks very much.